Bonjour Marc,
Bonjour Valérie, ça va?
ça va et toi?
Pas pire.
Bonjour
Good.
Marc,
Allô Tony, ça va?
ça va bien, merci. Et toi?
Pas pire.
Excellent.
Marc, est-ce que tu m'entends bien?
Oui, pas de problème.
Ok, merci.
OK.
À plus tard.
Bonjour Marc, ça va bien?
Oui, ça va.
Ça a l'air qu'on va avoir la réunion, le meeting en français aujourd'hui. Tout le monde parle français.
Just to let you know that we are live on YouTube.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chair.
Hey, Mark.
Morning, Chair.
Good morning, Tony. How are you?
Very good. We're live on YouTube according to the coordinator. So
Okay.
just, you know.
Thank you.
Okay.
Morning, Chair.
Good morning, Chief. Good to see you.
Is the baby still sleeping through the night?
In intervals, yes.
Yeah. Good.
She gets up every sometimes we get a 4-hour stretch for feedings. So.
It's all part of the adventure and the fun.
Mark, just for ease, can you drop the revised notes into our Teams chat, please? I just want to pull that relevant section out because I've done some work on the document.
Sorry, Chair, you want me to send it to you again?
Do you mind just popping it into Teams?
In Teams, sure.
Thanks, Mark. I just need to pull out the correspondence section and the delegation name just for the notes. That's all. So even if you just want to pull that one small section out, that's just fine. Whatever's easier.
Okay.
Mr. DeMonte, we still have you for a couple more of these, right? Or this isn't your last one.
No, Chair. You got me for this one, and the one in October as well too, where we've got another bigger file too, community safety wellbeing. So towings today, community safety wellbeing, and a few other reports. So yeah, I'm here for another one.
Well, I'm glad that I don't have to spend the next 8 minutes writing your eulogy. That's
No,
wonderful.
no, and I hope you don't do that in the next one either. Just, friendly goodbye would be fine. Thank you.
Okay, fair enough. I'll be putting in for a permit through Roger for fireworks for that one for you. So just please sign off on it.
Okay.
Good morning, Matt in the jacket.
Good morning, Jeff in a sweater. How are you?
I'm well. The office is freezing. Oh my Lord.
Is it?
It is. Good morning, Chief. Good morning, Mark. Good morning, Teresa.
Good morning, Teresa. Good morning.
Good morning, Eli.
Eli.
Good morning, everyone.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it is. The AC in my office is.
Just ripping, eh?
Yeah,
I
it's
still
chilly.
think it's 40 outside.
Yeah.
Switch gears.
I think it is supposed to go up to, mid 20s today. So hopefully it'll even out for you throughout the meeting.
I don't mind. I can always throw more sweaters on.
That is true.
And
At home, I just
Anthony,
bake.
Anthony, we're really, well, personally, I'm sorry to see you go, but happy for you on your announcement.
Thank you. That's very, very kind. I'm here for a couple more meetings though, so you can't get rid of me that quickly. We got a few more things to finish up. I've got to make sure we get them done for you.
We're going to remind you why you want to leave.
No, not at all. Thanks.
Kidding.
You shouldn't be sad because he's leaving. Because he managed 2 floods, 1 tornadoes, and 1 pandemic. What else, what else out
Who
there?
knows what's ahead of us and who's going to
There
help
you
us
go.
then?
He owes us nothing. Nothing.
Exactly.
It's totally selfish, I know. Happy for him.
Councillor El Shansuri said it. He says maybe now the city will be calm. Maybe I was the black cloud bringing all those disasters for you.
Aha, we discovered it. Okay.
Well, honestly, when we had the tornadoes, Tony, he was at the fire truck with me. We were coming out, and the mayor was there too. He's briefing us, and he said to me, "What the hell wrong with you? You get one flood, one tornadoes. What's next? Is pandemic?" Well, guess what? We did
Hey-o.
have a pandemic, so.
That's a
Okay,
true
I'm-
story, actually.
Just watching out for the locusts now. Oops, I shouldn't have said that.
Oh,
All what I can say to you, thank God all these things happen and we have the resources to, if that what happened, it was under West Carleton days, we'll be bankrupt as a municipality. Oh, it's no other lie.
that is one good thing about amalgamation, is that we can all be there for each other in times like this.
True.
You're right.
That is so true.
You're right.
People forget that sometimes. Do we have a lot of speaker, Mark, for item 8?
No, we have one.
Are we doing presentation or is no need? I think there's presentation.
Yes, there will be a brief one.
Okay.
Mark, just so you know, this morning at 10:30, between 10:30 and 10:50, I need to step away for a meeting with a provincial minister, and Vice Chair Eglai will take over the chair during that time. I will return, and Vice Chair Eglai has a meeting with the same provincial minister at 11 a.m. So we'll have a little bit of a So we'll have a little bit of an in and out during that time. So I just wanted to let you know that Vice Chair Eglai will take the chair from 10:30 until 10:50.
Thank you.
If Councillor Fleury doesn't ask so many questions, maybe we'll be done by 10:30. Good morning, Matt.
Good morning, Matt. How are you?
See what
Blame me
happened.
for caring. Blame me for caring. I can take it.
See what happened when you show up late to the party. You get picked on.
He's still got a minute to spare.
Okay.
It's good to see you this morning. Is it chilly in your office over there too, Matt?
Oh, great. It's perfect here. You're always welcome to City Hall.
No, Jeff was complaining that it's a bit chilly over there this morning.
Yeah, it is chilly on that side of the row. I don't know why. We're
Yeah, it's-
warm on that side.
We get the sun, all the sun on that side.
Plus, Jeff is more mature than Matt, so.
That's a very gentle way to put it.
Yeah, I feel the chill in my bones, my the little pains, the aches. Good grief.
I think we've got quorum. You're on mute, Keith. I'm sure it was a funny.
I was saying more importantly, we have Chief DeMonte, so.
That's right.
You know.
That's right.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you all.
We'll miss you.
Appreciate it.
Vice Chair, the clerk is aware of our 10:30, 11 o'clock events, so we'll be in good shape.
Oh, they're events, okay.
Are they events? I'll let you know how eventful they were. We've got quorum, Mr. Coordinator.
I believe we do, Chair.
Wonderful. Well then, without further ado, Good morning and welcome to the Community and Protective Services Committee meeting of September 16th, 2021. I would like to call the meeting to order, and this meeting is being held remotely through Zoom, as I'm sure everyone is aware of now. Please note that those who do not need to participate in the meeting can also watch it on the live stream on the Ottawa City Council YouTube channel. A reminder to participants to please keep your microphones muted until you are called on to speak. I'll provide each committee member with the opportunity to ask questions or comment on each item in the order in which they raise their hand on Zoom. Committee members will be called on first, followed by any members of council who have joined the meeting. So welcome to those who have. For panelists, the raise hand function is found at the bottom of the participants lists. For attendees, you'll find the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom window. For those calling in, please press *9 to raise your hand. You do not need to do so right now. The committee coordinator will be watching for those cues. The usual 5-minute speaking limit will apply. However, you can come back on the board. Members are also reminded to submit any motions, visual supports, or declarations of interest in writing to the coordinator at their earliest convenience. Although the deadlines have passed for residents to register to speak at this committee, residents may still make written submissions prior to council on September 22nd. If you have technical difficulties signing in to the meeting, you can contact the clerk's office at committees@ottawa.ca or by calling 613-580-2424, extension 28821. Well, welcome back. It's been a couple of months since the last meeting of CPSC. J'espère que vous avez pu vous détendre cet été. L'automne s'annonce occupé. I hope you've had some time to relax over the summer. We have a busy fall ahead. I would like to begin by acknowledging that Ottawa is built on unceded Algonquin Anishinaabe territory, and the people of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation have lived on this territory for millennia, and their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. And the City of Ottawa honors the people and the land of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nations, all First Nations, Inuit, Métis people, and their valuable past and present contributions to this land. Staff from Emergency and Protective Services have joined us to present a new business licensing regime and regulations governing towing service in Ottawa. I expect we'll spend some time discussing this today. So when we get to that item on the agenda, I'll introduce the report and speak to how we'll proceed. We'll also receive an update on bylaw and regulatory services activities in 2019 and 2020. And this report measures the services performance and outlines how they are dealing with increased demand. The report also highlights the key role that bylaw staff played in the city's COVID-19 response. In 2020, our bylaw officers stayed very busy enforcing COVID-19 regulations imposed by the province. They conducted proactive patrols and business compliance checks and responded to more than 13,000 pandemic-related service requests, including more than 2,400 calls about the temporary mandatory mask bylaw. That is on top of all of the other bylaw enforcement activities that were required of them this year. Les membres du personnel de service de règlement municipaux ont déployé des efforts considérables et se sont mobilisés au service de la santé publique tout au long d'une année hors du commun. Je tiens donc à les remercier. So thank you who made extraordinary to our bylaw and regulatory services officers who made extraordinary efforts to serve public health in a year that was anything but ordinary. Also on our agenda today, we have an abundance of commemorative naming proposals to honor members of our community. Always a good thing to do, and an update from Crime Prevention Ottawa, and a bit of housekeeping to reaffirm that the Community and Social Services Department will maintain the city's programs for essential health and social support and supports in social housing. Now let's move on to today's agenda. I have received no regrets. Could the committee coordinator please call the roll? A reminder to members to unmute themselves when they are called. Thank you.
Councillor Meehan,
Here.
Councillor Kitts,
Here.
Councillor McKenney, Councillor Fleury,
If Councillor McKinney was on mute, I'm here.
We see them.
Councillor Tierney,
Present.
Councillor Deans,
Here.
Councillor Kavanaugh,
Here.
Councillor El Shantiri,
Present.
Councillor Dudas, Councillor Eglai.
Here.
Chair Luloff.
I am here. It's so nice to see all of you. You all look quite rested. I really don't know what that looks like anymore after dealing with a toddler and a 1-month-old for the last month. So you all look very wonderful. So bear with me as I'm still a little bit sleep deprived. Do we have any declarations of interest other than no extreme interest in everything that's on the agenda today? Any declarations of interest? Seeing none. A confirmation of minutes number 20 for Thursday, June 17th, 2021. Are the minutes for the meeting of June 17th, 2021 confirmed? Confirmed?
Confirmed.
Thank you. We have a procedural motion to add 2 missed council inquiries. If we can have Vice Chair Eglai read that motion now. This is for Cornerstone Housing for Women and fireworks policies and procedures. Please go ahead, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If that motion can be put up on the screen, please.
Just waiting for my worthy colleague to put that up.
Just bear with us for a quick moment.
So this is a motion to add in 2 missed council inquiries. It's procedural in nature. I don't think I need to read through the whole thing, but the inquiries, one is dealing with Cornerstone Housing for Women. The second is fireworks policies and procedures. And it's simply, as I say, to add these to the list of communications on the agenda pursuant to subsection 89.3 of our rules of procedure.
Is this motion carried? Carried?
Carried.
Thank you very much, everyone. Okay, so moving on to item number 1, we have 7 commemorative naming reports, and all are accepted by ward councillors without any opposition in the community. So we'll go through them one by one. Should anyone wish to speak on them? Sorry, Councillor Fleury, do you have a point of order?
Yes, I do. I apologize, Chair. We did add the inquiries. One of the inquiries I'd love to raise, which is the one for the Byron Market response. So I don't know if usually at the beginning of the meeting we're able to raise those inquiry responses. So I'd like to raise that one.
Sure. Yeah, we can lift. Does anybody wish to lift any of the other responses for discussion at the end of the meeting? I was going to do it as we got to it, but that's a good flag, Councillor Floyd. Thank you very much. We will discuss that item when we get to communications at the end. Thank you very much. Okay, so item number 1, commemorative naming proposal Bradley Craig Park. This is in Stittsville. Is this item carried, or does anyone wish to discuss this item? Carried?
Carried.
Thank you. Item number 2, a commemorative naming proposal Bob Mills Park. This is also in Stittsville. Is this item carried?
Carried. Carried.
Item number 3, commemorative naming proposal Bradley Square. This is also in Stittsville. Do we have? Is this item carried as well?
Carried.
Commemorative naming proposal for Dr. Emile Major. This is in Cumberland 19. Does anyone wish to speak on this, or is this item carried?
Carried. Carried.
Number 5, commemorative naming proposal John O'Malley Park. This is in Gloucester, South Nepean. Is this item carried?
Carried.
Thank you. Number 6, a commemorative naming proposal for Laura Dubois Park. This is in Canada South. Is this item carried?
Carried.
Did you say Dubois or Dudas?
Dubois.
Okay, want to make sure.
Also had a moment of pause.
Our Laura Dudas is still with us. There's no need to commemorate. We have her with us today. Thank goodness. Item number 7, Mantha Park. This is in Cumberland, Ward 19. Is this item carried?
Okay.
Thanks, everyone. We'll now move on to.
Miss Chair,
Yes,
just
please.
I just want to make a comment overall that I appreciate efforts when we find women to honor, and that we're making more and more efforts to do that in our commemorations. And I hope we'll continue in that direction because I'm sure there's a lot of worthy people in the communities who deserve recognition. So I hope we'll continue that trend.
That is unquestionably true, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 8. This is the Towing Services Regulatory Review and Licensing Regime. So as detailed in the staff report, we're voting today on a licensing regime for tow service operators, tow truck drivers, and vehicle storage facility operators. And I appreciate that the towing industry has had many challenges, and that it is a very competitive industry. Many of us also heard concerns from our communities and our constituents about high and inconsistent rates and lack of transparency for towing transactions. This licensing regime addresses the concerns of high rates and aggressive sales tactics, while at the same time creating a balanced towing regime with clear accountability for operators and drivers. The provincial government has recently passed legislation to regulate the towing industry at the provincial level, but that legislation is not yet in force, and the timing of its implementation is unknown. The immediate action being recommended in the staff report will put into place local rules that support consumer protection, public safety, and protection of property for our residents. In addition, staff are recommending 2.5 full-time equivalents in bylaw and regulatory services to administer and enforce the licensing regime, which is necessary for the significant investigative and administrative work involved to ensure that this regime is successful. Extensive consultations and engagement have informed the recommendations in the report that we are discussing today, which balance the desires of the community, the towing industry, and enforcement agencies with what the municipality has the authority to implement in order to protect residents. The issue of towing in our community and in the province is complex, and it affects many. However, I will remind those in attendance that we are here to specifically discuss the recommended licensing regime, and ask that you remember that disrespectful behavior or coarse language would not be tolerated at this committee. In closing, the proposed licensing regime and rules for storing towed vehicles are fair and reasonable and will increase accountability for service providers and increase public safety. Staff from EPS have a presentation followed by delegations and then questions to staff. Staff from Public Policy Development and Bylaw and Regulatory Services are available for questions on the licensing regime. And representatives from the Ottawa Police Service are also available to answer questions from a police perspective. I do know that we have a couple of motions on this item as well. So we'll go through the presentation. We'll get the motions on the floor. We will move to our public delegations and then move on to questions to staff. So I'll hand it now over to Mr. DeMonte and Valerie Bietlat for their presentation. Welcome, and please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning, members of committee. I'm joined today for the presentation by Valerie Bietlat, Manager of Public Policy, and Paul Blanchette, the Bylaw Review Specialist, who has led this file for us. We are presenting staff's report on the results of the Towing Services Regulatory Review, as well as specific recommendations for a comprehensive new business licensing regime for the towing industry. Committee members will recall that this review forms part of the council-approved bylaw review work plan for this term of council. The licensing regime, associated regulations focus on consumer protection, public safety, and protection of property. Le régime de permis des règlements d'application proposés vise essentiellement à protéger le consommateur et assurer la sécurité publique. Both public consultation and extensive stakeholder engagement have informed the development of staff's recommendation. Staff have obtained input from law enforcement agencies, tow companies and tow truck drivers, as well as storage facility operators, auto clubs, and insurance providers, and the public. What staff heard most often during these consultations was that regulations were needed in Ottawa to address high towing and storage rates, to prevent overbilling, and to provide transparency and consistency in towing transactions. I will now turn the presentation over to Ms. Bietlo to provide key details of the staff report and proposed regulations. And following the presentation, staff, as always, will be available to answer any questions. As well, representatives of the Ottawa Police Services are also present to answer questions to provide a police perspective on towing issues. Today with us, we are joined by Inspector Peter Jupp, Staff Sergeant Edward Yeomans, and Constable Pram Singh. Thank you very much. Valerie, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. DeMonte. Next slide, please. Staff are recommending that tow service operators, tow truck drivers, and vehicle facility operators be required to obtain a license in Ottawa and comply with regulations. Approval is also sought for 2.5 FTE for bylaw and regulatory services in order to administer and manage these new licenses and to enforce the new regulations. These positions would be funded on a full cost recovery basis through licensing fees. Finally, staff also recommend amendments to existing regulations for public garages that store towed vehicles, as well as private parking enforcement agencies, or PPEAs, to facilitate the tow of illegally parked vehicles on private property. Together, these will provide a comprehensive set of regulations in Ottawa for towing. Next slide, please. Tous les exploitants de services de remorquage, les conducteurs de dépanneuses et les exploitants d'établissements d'entreposage de véhicules devront obtenir un permis d'entreprise et se conformer au règlement. The proposed regime creates measured regulations to ensure consumer protection from the beginning of the towing transaction, when the tow services are first engaged, to the end, when the towed vehicle is stored. As part of the license application process, tow operators, or the tow companies, will need to provide a valid CVOR, submit a police record check and proof of insurance, and provide details of every tow truck used in the business. Every tow truck driver will need to provide proof of a good driving record, submit a police record check, and disclose the name of the tow operator for whom they're providing tow services in order to obtain a license. Vehicle storage facility operators will be required to obtain a license and provide timely notice to vehicle owners of where their vehicles are stored. They'll need to keep logs of every vehicle that is brought to and stored at their facility for follow-up and investigation. They will also have to keep minimum business hours and allow vehicle operators access to the property to retrieve their personal possessions. The proposed regulations create accountability. Tow service operators will be accountable for both the drivers that they use for their services and the tow trucks that they use in their fleet. Tow operators will need to ensure that all of their drivers are licensed and keep detailed accounts of each tow service that's provided in order to allow for follow-up and investigation as needed. Vehicle standards are also proposed, and operators will be responsible for ensuring that every truck in their service not only is safe and free of mechanical defects, but also that it's appropriate and purpose-built for the actual tow service being provided. Each vehicle used in the service will have to clearly indicate the name and phone number of the company and bear the city-issued tow plate so that licensed providers are easily identified for both consumers and for law enforcement. Conduct rules for tow truck drivers will also be established. They will have to comply with instructions of law enforcement officials at the scene and follow the vehicle owner's directions regarding where the vehicle is to be towed. Drivers will be prohibited from inducing a tow customer to hiring them by misleading or deceiving them or making false representations about the state of the vehicle. Transactional rules to protect customers are also included in this licensing regime. No tow truck driver will be able to hook, lift, or tow a vehicle unless they have obtained prior authorization in writing to do so from either the tow customer or the police officer or other official at the scene. The tow customer will always have the first choice of which tow provider to choose. All tow trucks will be required to remain 100 meters from the accident scene unless their services are requested by the customer or an authorized official at the scene. An itemized list of fares and rates will also have to be disclosed to the customer as part of that authorization process, and the location of where the vehicle is to be towed will be recorded. Proposed regulations also create local enforcement and compliance tools for bylaw and regulatory services and for the Ottawa Police Service. Offenses for non-compliance by any licensee are created in the bylaw with charges with corresponding fines that can be laid for violations. The city's chief licensing inspector will have the authority to order the production of any document for inspection and review in order to ensure compliance with the transactional and other regulations. He'll also be able to inspect or require the inspection of any vehicle that's used in the tow service where necessary. And finally, the chief license inspector will also have the authority to place conditions on a license in order to address any issues of concern with a particular licensee and can suspend and revoke licenses if necessary. Next slide, please. An important aspect of the proposed regulations is establishing prescribed fares and rates for key towing and storage services. Un aspect important et essentiel des règlements proposés consiste à établir les frais et les tarifs imposés pour les services essentiels de remorquage et d'entreposage. Les frais imposés sont prévisibles pour le consommateur, permettent de prévenir la surfacturation et la hausse de frais, et sont également équitables pour les fournisseurs de services de remorquage. Prescribed or set fees were supported both by members of the public and by some industry stakeholders, as they provide certainty for the consumer, prevent overbilling and escalating fees, and are fair for the customer and towing providers alike. Staff are therefore recommending that Council prescribe 11 key tow and service rates as part of this licensing regime. Examples include a $300 standard collision tow, $175 fare for a non-collision tow, $3.25 per kilometer after the first 20 kilometers, and a $60 a day rate for vehicle storage, both indoor and outdoor. Included in the standard collision tow and non-collision tow rates are associated services such as securing the vehicle and related administration fees, so that tow operators could not charge these extra fees for associated services, as this was an issue that was raised in consultation. Afin que les tarifs restent viables et équitables pour l'industrie, ils seront majorés chaque année d'après l'indice de prix à la consommation de Statistique Canada pour la région d'Ottawa-Gatineau. Les tarifs ainsi indexés seraient communiqués chaque année à tous les titulaires de permis ainsi qu'au public. In order to keep the rates viable and fair for licensees, staff recommend that they be increased annually based on Statistics Canada's Consumer Price Index for the Ottawa-Gatineau region. Increased rates would then be communicated to all licensees and to the public on an annual basis. Next slide, please. Both public garages and private parking enforcement agencies, or PPEAs, are already licensed by the city and touch upon towing. As a result, some new regulations are recommended to ensure consistency in towing and storage rules across the spectrum of services. Public garages include repair facilities and body shops where towed vehicles can be stored. Proposed amendments to their existing regulations include a requirement to file applicable vehicle storage rates with the chief license inspector and disclose these to the consumer upon request. If they charge for storage of towed vehicles, a maximum prescribed rate of storage of $60 a day, and a prohibition for public garage licensees to request or receive a drop fee. Private parking enforcement agencies, or PPEAs, are licensed businesses that use deputized officers to enforce the city's traffic and parking bylaw on private property. Amendments to their regulations include prohibiting PPEAs from playing a dual role, that is, from being both a licensed PPEA that enforces the city bylaw and a tow service provider. And this is to ensure that conflicts of interest are avoided. We're also recommending to allow PPEAs to facilitate towing of vehicles off of private property under specific conditions set by bylaw and regulatory services, such as the need for issuing a city ticket for parking violations and initiating the tow only through the city's bylaw and regulatory dispatch and using their contracted tow provider. Allowing PPEAs to facilitate tows under these specific conditions was part of a trial pilot project run by Bylaw and Regulatory Services that proved to be very successful over the last 2 years and has improved wait times for towing vehicles off of private property when illegally parked. Next slide, please. In June of 2021, the province of Ontario enacted the Towing and Storage Safety and Enforcement Act in order to create a new system of provincial oversight through certifications for tow companies, tow drivers, and vehicle storage providers. However, as noted by the chair, this act has not yet been proclaimed into force and is unlikely to be proclaimed into force until the fulsome regulations are developed under it. Members of the city's public policy development branch are part of the technical advisory group that's providing input to the province as it develops these regulations. And we will continue to meet with the Ministry of Transportation of Ontario until the end of the year to provide that input. Staff recommend that council not wait for this legislation to go into force. Staff recommend that local rules be adopted and implemented immediately in the city of Ottawa in order to provide for consumer protection. Staff will monitor the development of the provincial regulations, and once the full legislation comes into force, staff will review it. If any amendments are required to the city's towing bylaw at that time, staff will recommend them to either address duplication or conflict that may arise. Next slide, please. Mr. Chair, staff are recommending that the proposed bylaw and the related regulations come into force on January 1st, 2022. This will provide a little over 3 months for staff to outreach and educate potential licensees on the new regulations. It will also allow staff to conduct a public communication and education campaign to educate the consumer on their rights, on the consumer protection provisions, and on prescribed fares and rates. This concludes the formal presentation. Monsieur le Président, il me ferait plaisir de répondre à vos questions. Merci.
Thank you very much. It is my understanding that we have 2 pre-circulated motions on this item. I would ask that the councillors please place these items on the floor prior to going to delegations. The first that I have here is from Councillor Fleury, I believe. Councillor Fleury, if you would like to go ahead and read your motion.
No, Mr. Chair, my motion is about bylaw services.
Understood. Thank you very much. Then I believe that we have a motion to be read in by Councillor McKinney on behalf of Councillor Leeper. And Councillor Leeper, if you wish to say anything about the motion, we'll allow for that as well. So I'll hand the mic over to them to go ahead and introduce this motion. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair. So we have in Kitchissippi, and I understand elsewhere in the city, localized issues associated with the staging of tow trucks. They're parking in residential neighborhoods waiting for calls, and sometimes the behaviors when they get that call can be problematic for the residential neighborhoods in which they're staging. The community is seeking they're seeking a power on the part of the city to create tow truck specific regulations. I've asked and worked with staff on this motion to see whether that is something that is feasible. Staff have asked us to give them some time to watch the operation to see how the provisions of the existing bylaw with respect to requiring adherence to all traffic and applicable bylaws works. So with I understand staff's support. We've worked together on this motion. Whereas inappropriate staging by tow trucks is a frequent concern raised by residents, and whereas the users of schools, daycare centers, parks, and other sensitive sites may be made less safe by frequent tow truck activity, and whereas it is in the public interest to address the specific and unique safety concerns posed by the frequent operation of tow trucks in residential neighborhoods and in proximity to vulnerable residents. Therefore, be it resolved that the Community and Protective Services Committee recommend Council to direct Traffic Services to undertake a review of the city's traffic and parking bylaw and the city's parking strategy to determine whether any specific traffic, parking, and stopping rules for tow trucks may be feasible or necessary, and to report to the Transportation Committee with any recommendations on same in Q2 of 2023. So this motion has been crafted to provide staff the wiggle room they need, as we are sensitive to the very high workload that council has been putting on their plate for the past while. So I hope that the colleagues will be able to support that. Thank you.
This makes a great deal of sense. Councillor McKenney, do you wish to say anything on this item before we move on to delegations as the mover?
No, that's fine. I think Councillor Reaper has covered it. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, no problem. Thank you very much. Okay, so we have received 2 written submissions on this item, one from the Insurance Bureau of Canada, which has been previously distributed, and also a second from the Hintonburg Community Association. Thank you very much for your engagement on this file. We have one public delegation on this item. We have Al Awada from Express Towing, who would like to address the committee. Welcome to committee, Al, and please go ahead.
Hello, good morning. I was actually reading some of these things on here regarding, I've got a couple of things that I wanted to mention regarding PPEA and also just some of the pricing and licensing of tow trucks. Regarding PPA, I was noticing that Valerie was indicating that just to give you a little a snapshot, we have currently, how do we protect the parking contracts or private parking contracts that a small company has, where you guys are putting in place a PPA who only calls on to the contracted tow, maybe a bylaw officer, police officer, security, etc. So if you are using a bylaw officer to come and ticket or tow a vehicle, they can ticket the vehicle, but then you indicate that, oh, there's a gray area there where they have to call their contracted, which is one company in the city, whereas we have multiple buildings that we deal with. And do they ticket the vehicle and issue the tow who is contracted through the landlord of that building or private property? Where's that gray area in there? That's one question. And then I can go on to the next. Because based on the PPEA, how you guys are wording it here, it's saying whoever is, delegating the ticket and tow, they're contracting the company that you guys deal with at that point, which makes no fairness to smaller guys like ourselves. So that's just one aspect of things. And then another thing I was looking at is, I was reading up on other municipalities in Ontario who've implemented these regulations, which for first and foremost, I think it's a great thing that you guys are doing, because it helps, one, consumer protection, two, it makes it fair for towing companies to be delegated a job because the pricing's all the same, and three, it just saves a lot of headaches. So under the pricing that you have had, it says basic services. I've looked at other municipalities and pricing. It says the basic services prices. I just was wondering if that you guys are gonna delegate or put in the other pricings that are involved. May it be, like I was looking at Brampton and other places, surrounding areas in Toronto. They have everything listed, so it makes it easier for the consumer to see. At the same time, it makes it easier for us to delegate, rather than saying, okay, well, this is the basic price. At the same time, we don't know what the other things are, and we want to be able to do so we can have it in our pricing. So these are just some little things I have. I only have 5 minutes, I understand, but just wanted to see if you guys can give us like a little bit more elaboration on what you have in place regarding PPEA, because I'm going to be definitely very honest with you. Recently, there was a big event in Ottawa, Escapade. We were doing a lot of parking control and made things very hard for us. We just want to be able to get things, that gray area that's been going on for so long. You know, yes, you have bylaw officer or someone giving tickets, but why is it going only now based on the paperwork that you have to one company that's contracted, and it's only one company? There's private parking, and private parking is delegated to, you know, if we have, you know, the contracts in place. So I want to know how this is going to be, you know, looked at or seen, if anyone can answer that, if you don't mind.
We'll have to have a member of the committee ask those questions to staff, but you still have a minute if you'd like to make any further comments before we move on to questions to staff.
Honestly, it's we've been talking about this for years. Thank God you guys are actually putting something in place. There are good apples in any business. There's also bad apples. This will actually be able to regulate certain things, regulate pricing, regulate you know, who's in the business, who's out of the business, but at the same time be able to make things fair for a small business or a big business and protect the consumer. Where right now, I'm just going to be completely honest, before, I don't know if you got, we used to use CPIC to be able to call in a private parking and be like, hey, this is the vehicle. They run the plate. They let us know if it's stolen, non-stolen, anything. They know where the vehicle's going to. Whereas now the gray area is, we tow this vehicle, we can't report it to police because CPIC's used through Ottawa Police Service or RCMP, and it makes the consumer go on a goose hunt figuring out where their vehicle is. And at the end of the day, it gets reported stolen. Then they have to take, the police officers waste their time to take it off the system. They have to put in a report, et cetera, et cetera. So this is actually great that you guys are putting something in place, but there's still a gray area, whereas, you know, we have these contracts, or companies have these contracts in place, and how do we delegate? Yes, you want the bylaw officer to do the ticket, no problem. However, who is ever contracted to do the tow for that building or private property, great. City property, we understand it's contracted through a company that's through bylaw, but now we have to talk about private parking, and that's the gray area that we need to address.
Thanks, Mr. Owada. The unfortunately, the scenario that you kind of lay out for us in the end, where, you know, a car gets reported stolen because they don't know where it's been towed to, and it's very difficult to track that down, is something that I've personally experienced. So I appreciate you highlighting that. It does make things very, very difficult and quite frustrating and embarrassing when you have to call the police back to say that it's not actually stolen. Councillor El-Shantiri, questions to staff. Would you like to pick up that line of questioning? Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Awad, for taking the time to. Mr. Awad, were you consulted with staff before?
Yes, on multiple occasions.
So you have been consulted, and some of those concerns you bring today has been in discussion with city staff. Is that correct?
Yes. So I've actually called the police line. There's a CPIC, and I've talked to multiple police officers. I've talked to city council. I've talked to CPIC. There was an individual named Kim there. And this gray area that I talk about that needs to be addressed has been going on for years and years. And I only mention it because it puts the consumer, you know, at a goose hunt. It puts us in a situation where it makes us look bad because we can't report a vehicle being towed from a certain situation, where now you're putting into place, hey, a PPA bylaw can ticket the vehicle and then get it towed. But what you have in the paperwork is getting it towed by the contracted tow through the city. However, that's understandable on city property. In terms of private property, where we have multiple buildings, you got to make it easier for the consumer. You got to make it easier for the towing company. At the same time, for police, you're wasting police time going to deal with these things where it can easily be done through a system in place, through CPIC, through police putting a report in saying this vehicle has been towed 1, 2, 3, or bylaw putting it into place. There's a lot of gray areas, and it needs to be addressed. And the same thing with the whole towing industry.
I understand this, Mr. Awad. Trust me, I've been I've been working with the general manager in the last 6 years to get this report where we are today. We worked with the CAA, we met with some of your colleagues, we met with the insurance company, and I'm glad to hear from you. You are happy to see this is happening. Now, some of the questions you raise, I will be raising them with staff, and I'd like to understand as well, and like the chair said earlier, if somebody go park somewhere and the car disappear, who should we call? Should I call the police? Should I call the 311? That's a fair question, and we'll clarify it. And but if you have some other concern, you'd like to send them to our staff, to Valerie, who's been really spending the whole week last week working with us on some of the questions coming in the last minute. We'll need to work with you on this. But it's just want you to know, to see people like you coming out in support of this bylaw and this regulation, because it is overdue. But thank you for taking the time to come in.
I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Staff, unless Mr. Chair, staff would like to comment now, so we can nip it. I'm not sure. It's up to you.
We'll finish with the questions to the delegation. We'll move right over to questions to staff. It will only be a couple of minutes, no problem at all. For question to the delegation, Vice Chair Aguilar, please go ahead.
Sorry, I had my hand up a little early. My questions were for staff. So if you want to shift into them responding to what Mr. Awada had to say, I think that I was going to ask some questions around that in any event. So I think that would be fair.
Councillor Brockington, is it a thumbs up if it's a question to the delegation? No? Okay, great. So moving on to questions to staff, please go ahead, Vice Chair.
Yeah, so essentially, Mr. Watt is still on the screen with us, and he posed an initial concern and question around the report. And as you know, Valerie and Tony, delegation can't ask questions to you, but we can. So the initial concern that Mr. Watt raised, and I do thank him for his support, wondering if you can speak to the concern that he raised in his presentation.
I believe Roger is also on the line, so both Roger and Valerie can answer, because there were two questions, one a more policy question, the other an enforcement. So I'll let them answer.
Correct. Thank you.
I guess I can go first, Valerie. So, Mr. Chair, just on the PPA toll pilot, I can tell you that there was very little uptake on private property enforcement agencies actually doing towing. It's not the primary purpose of their work, and I can tell you that we had less than 50 tows that were done in the last couple of years of that pilot. As far as the procurement process, the contractor that we have secured is done through the city's procurement process. The contract is up at the end of this year, by the way. So, different companies can certainly enter into that contract process, and whoever the contractor that is secured is the one that we use to tow the vehicle. So what we require the PPAs to do is, if they've followed the process, they've issued 3 tickets to the same vehicle on the same property, they are permitted to tow the vehicle from the property. They have to contact Bylaw and Regulatory Services to get that authorization, and we dispatch the tow truck to the scene.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
Well, I'm just waiting for Valerie to respond to question number 2.
Mr. Chair, the question was, how will the city be making public its prescribed fares and rates? So during the implementation time, during the last few months of this year, city staff would use that time to essentially develop a communications campaign, both for prospective licensees, so that they have all the information that they need to meet the regulations, including setting up for the prescribed fares and rates. But the other side of the coin would be an education campaign for consumers, so that they know what their rights are, they know what the consumer protection provisions of this new bylaw are, and that the prescribed fares and rates are public, so they know what can be charged for what services. The bylaw clearly outlines what the 11 prescribed fares and rates are, including those included services that I was mentioning, such as strapping down the vehicle and some administration fees. So that information will be public on ottawa.ca, and Bylaw and Regulatory Services will conduct an outreach campaign as well to make sure that everyone that there are multiple sources of information accessible to the public on that.
Thank you for that. Quick final question, Mr. Chair, a two-parter. In your consultations, Tony and the team, what was the single most significant concern raised by the public that the public felt needed to be addressed? And what is built into your plan in terms of metrics, if you will, to satisfy committee, council, and yourselves, and ultimately the public, that issue has been addressed? How will you track that?
Mr. Chair, I would say that the theme that bubbled up to the surface again and again was consumer protection, but the specific issue was high fares and rates, inconsistent fares and rates, and lack of transparency about fares and rates. So what we're doing to address that, of course, is asking council to prescribe those key fares and rates, making sure that they have to be disclosed to the customer as part of the authorization process. The metrics that we'll be using to measure the efficacy and compliance will be complaints received, service requests that are received, and communications directly to or from the industry itself. Because this will be a licensed group, we will be able to communicate with them more easily, and the Chief License Inspector will be able to do that as well.
Thank you for that. I have no further questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Moving on to questions to staff from committee members. We have Councillor Tierney, then Councillor Fleury, and if no more committee members, we'll have Councillor Brockington. Please go ahead, Councillor Tierney.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And it's been a long time coming. I'm very happy to see these new regulations. And I know Eli has certainly been all over this one for many, many years. I just wanted to check in on back in March 2019, one of my constituents had their car taken to a pound, to a towing compound, and they wouldn't answer the phone. It went on for months. I had to connect with the provincial representative to try to get some action on it. And eventually she wound up with this $3,000 bill because, of course, they said it was storage days, even though they wouldn't answer their phone. Do we have more of a stick now with some of these new regulations, specifically around the storage and on the properties and on that specific situation? It was widely reported by CBC in 2019. And that one really bugged me because literally they didn't answer the phone and just kept the meter running. Do you have any comment on that? Is there more strength in what we're doing today?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we're actually proposing the regulatory system to address this very issue in part. So vehicle storage providers will need a license to operate in Ottawa, but the Chief License Inspector will know who they are. If they are operating without a license, then that is a subject for enforcement as well. Once they're licensed, whenever they receive a towed vehicle, whether that vehicle is as a result of an accident or a parking infraction or whatever the case may be, their requirements will be the same. They will have to advise the vehicle owner within 72 hours that they have their vehicle. They will have to keep regular business hours, and we're proposing from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. In order to answer questions and deal with customers during those hours. They'll have to keep specific logs of every vehicle that they receive and every vehicle that leaves their lot. And they will have to allow vehicle owners access to their vehicles while in storage to retrieve personal possessions.
Okay, terrific. So in the event they don't answer the phone, there wouldn't be that opportunity anymore. We're closing that door where they can't just put on the blinders and running up tabs. They'll have to comply, and if they don't, what kind of enforcement aside from taking the license away would we have? Would we be able to put chains on their gates and say you're closed as a business? Like, I'm just trying to make sure we have enough stick power on this one, and it's not just some kind of legislation we're proposing without some kind of action.
Mr. Chair, I would refer enforcement questions to Chief Chapman.
Oh, great. Thank you. Hey, Roger.
Good morning. Mr. Chair, yeah, so as far as the licensing regime goes, you know, our authority would be to either apply conditions to the license, revoke the license, or suspend the license for continued non-compliance. If we're in a situation where we've revoked the license and this storage yard is no longer licensed, this would then become a police matter for non-compliance. So I will defer to Ottawa Police representatives to speak to that.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Peter Jupp from the Ottawa Police Service. Just to lead off, thank you very much. This is a great initiative that we fully support, that we've been involved in from the beginning. I'll refer to one of my subject matter experts to answer this one, Eddie or Parmit, if you're on the call.
This is ridiculous. Some questions started with Valerie, who said,
Mr. Vice Chair, you are not on mute.
And I don't think it's a ridiculous question, Keith. So let's let the staff
Please,
complete what they do.
Let's
come
to order, please.
Sorry, I wasn't suggesting that it was a ridiculous question. I'm sorry, I was dealing with another matter and I didn't have my mute on. I apologize for that.
That's
not,
okay.
Not about this presentation at all. It's a good news story.
Councillor Jurnee, you have the floor.
So I will say, in regards to enforcement of that particular situation, to me, it would appear to be very straightforward. We have an unlicensed operator with a vehicle that they're not authorized to have. Police would be contacted, we would attend the scene, and we would sort it out one way or another, as we would with any property that somebody's not entitled to have.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. This is really good legislation we're going to be passing, and thanks for all the great work of staff.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jurnee. Councillor Fleury, please, for 5. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank Valérie and the team. This is really comprehensive and really sets the good baseline for the consumer protection angle, what we're hearing from residents generally. I want to narrow in and focus on a couple of areas. I will be supporting the report, and I do think it's an important measure. I will be supporting Councillor Leeper's motion as well. Valerie, I want to ask you a couple of questions. So the "where's my car" element, I know you've clarified expectation. We work in real time, and you've recognized that in our conversation. But why did we land on 72 hours to inform a plate? Like, why don't or a tow? Why don't we require sort of a centralized database where, say, 311 could, if called upon, could inform the resident of where their car is located? Just trying to get clarity on the why 72 hours.
Mr. Chair, 72 hours was one aspect that we researched fairly extensively, and we got feedback from the industry. So let me take a step back. If someone's vehicle has been towed as a result of a parking infraction, based on the process that Mr. Chapman has already outlined, any consumer can call 311 and find out which storage location their vehicle has been towed to. However, generally, we felt that 72 hours was a measured, balanced approach. So giving enough time to the vehicle storage provider to receive the vehicle, update their logs, and then take the steps that they need to identify the registered owner of the vehicle if they're not known, and then contact them. A shorter time period of 72 hours, we heard from the industry, would be challenging. So we're proposing 3 days maximum. So within those 3 days after receiving the vehicle, the storage provider would have to contact the registered owner and tell them where their vehicle is.
I think that's one of the areas that I'd love for us when we do a review to consider, because I think people are working in real time and there are open data sources and so on where people could track in real time where their vehicle is if it is impounded. I think it goes back to the chair's comment relating to, is it a theft or is it was it towed? So maybe we can kind of put that on the review environment. I think this is the right baseline to start us off. It takes the right measure, but I would like us to consider that. Could you also clarify the complaint? So if ever a resident felt that elements of consumer protection or this licensing regime would like to provide a complaint, how would that be received by the city? Would that be a fraud and waste? Would that be a 311? Is there a specific liaison on this licensing? What's the approach?
Mr. Chair, any consumer or resident who has concerns about this future licensing regime, either the performance of a particular licensee or general concerns, should forward their complaints and their comments through 311. That is the quickest way to have a complaint registered. It allows us to keep data on these service requests. And as you know, then the issue gets forwarded immediately to Bylaw and Regulatory Services, where the Chief License Inspector can then review the complaint and take action as necessary. So 311 is the best bet.
Okay, thank you. Final two, one. So Councillor Leeper's motion is the right one in terms of the studying, but I wonder why we didn't consider in scene response, like say there's an accident on the 417 or on a city road, and then people chase, right? The towing operators chase to get there to get the service. Why didn't we require all licensees to be dispatched or to be called by an official or by a resident to get to the scene? I'm just wondering why we didn't go as far as that.
Mr. Chair, let me clarify. It will always be the consumer's first choice to choose their towing provider. We know that some consumers are part of auto clubs or they have towing arrangements with, for example, their vehicle dealership or any other arrangement. So it's always up to the consumer. That 100-meter separation distance from an accident scene is maintained in this bylaw. That regulation sits in the traffic and parking bylaw, but it will continue to be enforced, and it is a requirement of this bylaw as well. In terms of developing a city-administered dispatch system, Mr. Chair, that was outside of the scope of our work. We've put in consumer protection provisions to make sure that only providers that are requested by the consumer or by officials at the scene can actually come close to the scene within 100 meters. We have not found an example of a municipally administered dispatch system. And we know that the Ottawa Police Service has a policy in place to deal with calling a tow provider when the consumer is unable to do so. So from the staff perspective, these issues have been addressed through consumer protection provisions, and the exploration of a dispatch system was out of scope for our work for this bylaw.
Okay, and then my final question is maybe a direction for the review as well. This sets the baseline in terms of consumer protection, in terms of licensing, no question, we're there. I want to applaud the work. Could we review, when we met, I highlighted a couple of elements that, you know, to your point, are a bit out of scope, but at some point could be good to consider. I called it the one city approach, where, you know, police has their own tendering and dispatch system for towing. Bylaw has their own, Public Works for winter ops has their own, and that's not changing as we're doing this. So I wonder if when you come back and do a review, if we could bring that lens in consideration, as you know, residents don't want to jump loop and you know, is it a complaint because of a bylaw? Is it a complaint because it's private parking? Is it a complaint because police towed it? Like that starts to complexify the reporting and the approach. So I would just love if considerations in the review could be done in the one city lens environment.
Councillor, is that meant to be a direction to staff?
Yeah, I guess so. It's just elements to consider in their review.
So maybe we can get staff's opinion on whether that's something they can do. And if it is, maybe you can work on putting pen to paper, so to speak, so we have a more formal direction. Mr. DeMonte, can we hear from you on that?
Yeah, Vice Chair, certainly we can take that away. The intent, and it always is, to review once we have a bit of time under our belt to see how the policy is working and if it's meeting our objectives. And as Ms. Biedlow indicated, we have some performance metrics. I just want to be clear, we do tender for the city towing, so that's one tender, and the Auto Police Service, being an independent agency, has their own tender. That said, it doesn't mean we can't collaborate and look in the future, so we could look at that for as part of our review. I don't think it really needs to be direction. We can take that away, and when we do the review, ensure that that is looked at.
Are you comfortable with that, Councillor Fleury? Just no
Absolutely.
formal direction.
I want to thank.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to thank staff for the report. It's really an important step here. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Councillor El Chanteri, please.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. And what we heard from Mr. Awad Valerie, I want to go back to this, and he talked about the price. And as you remember, some of the reporting we received through the years, Mr. DeMonte, I believe you still have a copy of those. Sometimes tow company charge $200 for cleaning. Sometimes they charge something for using the kitty litter to absorb the oil on the highway. Like those additional charges, if I heard correctly, Mr. I was saying they are listed in other municipalities. Is it going to be listed within hours? That's my first question.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So all those included services in that standard collision tow rate that we're proposing are clearly listed in the bylaw. We'll make sure that Mr. Awada is provided with that information again, but as part of the implementation, we'll make sure that that information is clearly displayed on ottawa.ca as well.
And also, if I can follow up on Councillor Turney's question about the storage facilities. As we heard lately, is many of them popping up with just a gate and nobody, no shelter, no washroom facility. So you called in and your car is, let's see, I use my area, one on March Road. You show up with, with a taxi or a family member drive you over, but there's no one there. So that itself, and you have no place. And I do be concerned about some area is not lit in, is isolated, it's far in a rural area, because most of these storage areas, most of them, they are in an isolated area, basically. So we really have to have a strong warden how we deal with those storage places. And I'm not trying to create just one place because they have 24/7. That's the place, the only place we should go there. No, but other place, if they like to provide that service, it should be a list of it. So if a person go on to pick up her or his car and no one there, that's a safety concern, and how we want to deal with this. And I'm interested because sometimes you call and they're not available, and we don't work on the weekend, we don't want to work on Christmas. Next thing you know, the bill has increased. So I want to make sure we do something strong, so whether through the zoning or through the bylaw you have, how we're going to close that loop and making sure the people going to use a storage facility, they have some basic requirement, like an office, a business of our listed, as a part of the licensing, a phone number. And if we get 3 complaints, and I heard, I talked to you enough last week, I get that 3 calls I like to see us doing more, because sometimes we get a gray area between the person who leased the land and the person who owned the land. And if we don't go after the landowner, then the leaser can violate and then go and open again under another company. And we see that happen in the shisha business, let's be honest about it. So what we are doing to make sure we don't have that loophole?
Mr. Chair, as a licensing requirement, each vehicle storage facility operator will require a license from the City of Ottawa. They will have to meet, their facilities will have to meet zoning requirements in order to be licensed. So that is an upfront check and balance as part of the license application process. One of the requirements for vehicle storage facilities that we've built into the bylaw is that they have to hold business hours from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. and they have to be enclosed and lit at night in order to enhance security. So these operators will be known to the Chief License Inspector. The Chief License Inspector will know where they operate, how to contact them for follow-up and investigation. So that's what we've provided for currently in the bylaw.
Okay. Again, I don't want to speak again about this, but I just want to say a heartfelt thank you, Valerie, you, Paul, Tony, the whole team. It's been a long time coming. Yeah, I see Councillor Dean and I think we've been on this for a long time. We all heard those stories about, well, what we heard from Councillor Turney. I believe my predecessor or our previous councillor, Shad Kadri, has so many issues in Sittsville area. Anyway, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for reaching out to the industry. You spoke with them. This seems the majority are happy on board. And between now and council, if something we can clarify that pricing that Mr. Awad talked about, I would like to see, some clarity to him and to the other. And about the storage facility, the more we can think about make it transparent, make it open, make it consumer protection. We need to do this, so we don't end up having people outside the municipality and then say, oh, we are not licensed by Ottawa, I'm in Almont perhaps, or I'm in Empire, or I'm in Rockland. So we want to make sure those loopholes are shut down, because you heard in the past they were taking people across to Gatineau because they charged automatically to the insurance $1,200 to tow to Gatineau, and we have no say about it because they hooked the car and the car ended up in Gatineau or in Pakenham or somewhere. So we need, as much as we can, those whoever violate it will never see another license from the City of Ottawa as a tow company or storage facilities.
Mr. Chair, I've noted some of the comments from Councillor El-Shantari and Mr. Awada, and happy to reach out to Councillor El-Shantari to continue this conversation between now and council.
I know we spent enough time, you and I, on this file, Valerie, but we waited so long. Please, let's make it right. That's what I'm asking you, because people have the right, because especially when people in the accident, I don't have to tell you, they're a little bit upset, they're just, they're in pain, they don't know what they're doing, because sometimes they even have their own contact with, whether with CIA, with other company, but they don't think about it because somebody already put the hook on their car, and before they think about it, it's too late, and they're already facing those charges. If I see some of the list, $200 for a back kitty litter, like seriously. So anyway, we will continue, and I hope between now and council we can bring a final product. And I want to thank you so much, Valerie, for championing this file. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you very much. And our next speaker is Catherine Kitts. Councillor Kitts.
Thank you, Vice Chair. This builds a little bit off of some of the comments Councillor El-Shantari just made, but the report mentions that vehicles plated in Quebec will need to provide proof of equivalency. I'm just wondering, given the fluidity between our two municipalities, is there a significant difference between what is being proposed here in Ottawa versus what the standard is across the river?
Mr. Chair, not that we could find. There are equivalencies, and we've noted those in the bylaw. We have built some discretion for the Chief License Inspector to accept those equivalencies or not, depending if the landscape changes with respect to Quebec authorizations and certifications. I'll note that this is an area that the province is also potentially looking at, so we're having an eye on that. And we will continue our discussions with the Ministry of Transportation to see what the ministry would accept as equivalencies. But again, the Chief License Inspector will have some discretion to accept as he processes license applications for many operators in Quebec.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Just wanted to ensure there wasn't a potential loophole there. And I'll add my thanks for this great work. This is really overdue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And seeing no other committee members, I'll turn the mic over to Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you to staff as well. I've certainly followed this since I got elected and note a number of concerns in the public with the industry. It's disappointing. It really got out of hand. Many tow truck drivers are like sharks circling vulnerable people who have been in collisions, who are disoriented, who could be injured, and the industry is ripe for regulation across the province. We've seen the province take some action, but it really has gotten out of hand. And as the GM stated in his opening remarks, this is about high rates, overbilling, and the lack of transparency. And that's exactly what the industry is like. You see them on islands near Queensway on-ramps. You see people and fender benders, and they're literally circling, salivating at the opportunity to take advantage of the situation. So the regulations are very much appreciated. Can I get a sense from staff what the average collision tow is now, what the average non-collision tow is now, and what the average storage fee is now?
Yes, Mr. Chair, my colleague Paul Blanchette from Public Policy Development did do an environmental scan of other municipalities in Ontario and can provide you with an overview of that. I'll turn it over to him.
Sorry, here we go. Yeah, we took a look at other municipalities in the province, and what we saw was that the average rate for an accident tow was approximately $290, and for a non-accident tow was $175, and the recovery rates were similar to what we're recommending as well. We also took a look at invoice bills, and one of the big problems with the rates were the add-on fees, and we've included those, as Valerie was saying, into the basic flat rate. So we feel that the rates that we're recommending are within the range that we've seen at other municipalities.
So in Ottawa, is the average tow cost reasonable, but it's the add-ons that have really become the issue, the problem?
Yeah, you could see that from some of the bills that we looked at. The tow itself may be $300 or $400, but then the add-on tow, the add-on things like fees for cleanup or for wait time or for strapping the vehicle were added on, and they would increase the price substantially.
Can you explain to the committee why a car would be towed to a storage facility? Why does it not just go to a selected auto body shop that the car owner decides? What is the point of going to a storage facility?
Mr. Chair, what we've seen is that a vehicle after an accident may go to a storage facility if there wasn't other options available at the time, if it was late at night or whatever. But what we feel is that it's really up to the customer, and part of the transactional provisions that we're adding to the bylaw will make those conversations required, whether it goes to the process, whether it goes to the collision reporting center, or it goes to a repair facility, or to a storage. But storage is often the last choice. And then you often see in parking infractions that, or impounds, where it would go to a storage facility.
Thank you. Just, I don't know if this is for Valerie or GM or who can take this, but the insurance industry has in many ways endorsed these runaway bills for years. They keep paying them. Why hasn't the insurance industry been more firm and pushing back on these exorbitant tow invoices that their insured customers have been submitting? Where have they been in all of this?
Mr. Chair, I can't speak for the industry, of course, but I can confirm that we have consulted with both the Insurance Bureau of Canada and individual insurance providers, where we got local information about invoices that they were seeing in Ottawa for towing and storage services. I could share with you, Mr. Chair, that there is frustration from the industry representatives that we have consulted with about the uneven billing, the high rates, the lack of transparency. It is my understanding that some insurance providers will challenge a particular invoice that's provided either for towing or storage, and that those challenges can be, in some cases, brought up through the consumer protection complaint system of the province. There may be other ways as well to challenge a particular invoice through civil complaints. But again, what we were trying to do and what we are trying to do is bring some measure of consistency in the prescribed fares and rates. That aspect has received a great deal of support from the industry stakeholders that we consulted with.
Excellent. Finally, when do the new regulations go into effect?
Mr. Chair, we are recommending January 1st, 2022.
Excellent. All right. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brockington. I see that Councillor Kavanagh has her hand up.
Thank you. I waited till after Councillor Brockington. I didn't want to bump him. I didn't bumped a few times there. Thank you. I don't know if this is the right spot, Chair, for asking about the motion put forward by McKinney for Leaper. I just wanted to get comments from staff on it.
Well, it depends. It depends, Councillor. I don't see any other hands up. There's no other hands up for questions to staff generally. I see Councillor Meehan. Councillor Meehan, were you trying to raise your hand?
Yes, I was, Vice Chair. Thank you. It's just.
So if you can hang on. So perhaps, Councillor Kavanagh, the order would be questions to staff, then we would table the motion, deal with the motion, and then vote on the report.
Okay, I wanted to get their comments on it.
So we'll go to Councillor Meehan first, and then we'll move into the motion phase.
It's just a point of clarification. It has to do with the 72-hour notification. And I know, I think it was Valerie said that you could call anyone who has a car towed can call 311 and find out where it is. So I'm a little confused about that and the 72-hour notice of where the car is stored. Can someone just explain that to me? I thought if you were able to call 311 and find out where it is, what's the problem with why the 72 hours?
Mr. Chair, happy to clarify that. Thank you, Councillor. The 311 process that I was referring to is implemented when the tow is as a result of a parking infraction.
Okay.
And Mr. Chapman can speak to that process. But not all tows are as a result of a parking infraction or an accident for that matter. Yep. So for those tows that result from other means where perhaps the registered owner is not present when the car is being towed, we wanted to make sure there was a fail-safe, and that fail-safe is a maximum notification requirement of 72 hours that starts ticking when the vehicle storage facility receives that vehicle for storage.
Okay, so let me understand. If the vehicle is a parking infraction, they would it be the bylaw would know the license plate, and then it would go into the system, right?
Yes, that is correct. And Mr. Chapman is here to provide more details on that should you require it.
Okay, so would it not, can the same system not be utilized when it's not a parking infraction? the license plate would be inputted into the system, and the owner could receive notification before 72 hours that that vehicle has been taken to storage. I'm just wondering if the technology could not, there'd be more connectivity between the same system be used in both instances, whether it's a parking infraction or another example of the vehicle being towed.
Mr. Chair, where the city has no role in the towing, so if it's not as a result of a parking infraction, then the city would not know that that tow has been occurred. It doesn't fall under one of our regulatory regimes. And that is the gap that we are trying to fill with the 72-hour notice.
Okay. I'm just trying to figure out if we have software that could just make that a little bit faster than the 72 hours, just because, somebody would input it into a system. But I understand. But thanks, Valerie. Appreciate that. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor. Again, seeing no other hands up for questions to staff, I'm wondering if Court can put up the motion that Councillor Kavanagh is referring to, so we can have it in front of us while she poses her questions around the motion to staff.
Okay, thank you, Chair. And like my colleagues, I want to thank staff for all the work they put into it. I appreciate the briefing they gave committee members overall on this. And when we met, I mentioned there were issues about where tow trucks were parking. And so I appreciate this motion. This works out really well. I just wanted to get the comments from staff on this, because it was an issue in terms of where tow trucks were and being close to vulnerable residents. So I'm happy to see it here.
Mr. Chair, I can comment with respect to what the proposed bylaw will provide in terms of relief for traffic and parking infractions that may occur from tow trucks. All licensees, so tow truck drivers, will be required to comply with the traffic and parking bylaw. The traffic and parking bylaw, including that 100-meter separation distance that you've heard me mention, will continue to be enforced. So in situations of non-compliance, charges are available under the traffic and parking bylaw. But also, as I mentioned, the chief license inspector would be able to put conditions on a license or review the licensing status of any tow truck driver if there are repeated concerns about violations of city bylaws or provincial law for that matter. With respect to this motion, it is my understanding that it has been thoroughly vetted with Transportation Services staff and that they are in agreement.
That's great, because it's sort of another area. It's where the tow trucks are parking, waiting to, usually it's right near exits, but sometimes those exits are in parking lots that are close to residents. And we've heard complaints about that ongoing all summer, actually. So I appreciate that targeting. It's about when they're sitting there, the engine's running, ready to get onto a highway ramp and find customers, I guess. So it's a little bit different. They're not on streets. They're usually in parking lots, but the parking lots happen to be very close to residents. And so there's some issues with noise and behavior and just overall disturbance. I don't know if Mr. Chapman wants to comment on that, Chief.
Sorry, that's a challenge getting off mute there. Mr. Chair, yeah, I think Valerie's captured it very well. I think it's, this will give us the, an added ability to deal with non-compliant tow truck operators. We've dealt with situations where we have, where they've created their own staging area and where we try and, speak to these companies and have them move along. Not necessarily parking violations or idling violations. Those things we can deal with, but the prescribed provisions of this bylaw does require that they comply with all municipal bylaws. So this will give us some added authorities that we can deal with and apply conditions and such on their license if required.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Councillor Alcantara on the motion, please.
On the motion, I'm okay with the motion, but I just have one quick question to Valerie or Mr. DeMonte, if I may.
Okay.
Valerie, and forgive me, we should have asked you that before. The licensing of the tow trucks is it's got to be Ontario plate only, right? And tow trucks from Quebec cannot operate in our city. I just need to clarify that, or we need to put a motion about this, not to allow cars to cross to Gatineau unless the owner wishes to send it to Gatineau. Because we heard in the past that some company, they're just taking them to Gatineau, whether we like it or not.
Mr. Chair, to clarify, operators from Quebec can apply for a license in Ottawa. They will have to meet all of the licensing obligations and regulations in order to operate in Ottawa. We want to create the situation with, if there are providers that are coming to Ottawa in response of a consumer call or whatever the situation is, they have to have a business license to provide those services in Ottawa. They have to meet all the same requirements. So, Mr. Chair, I would just reiterate that with respect to the destination of the tow, part of the authorization process that we are recommending will require the consumer to decide where the vehicle is being towed. There will have to be authorization for that, and that will be recorded as part of the process.
So that's as far as the operator, but as far as the storage facility, that's only we can only license and making sure it's the one in Ontario. Is that correct?
Yes, only storage facilities in Ottawa.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And I will be meeting with you before council meeting. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. I don't see any other hands, either motion related or related to the report itself. I know Councillor Leeper had to leave the meeting. It sounds to me like the motion will be passed, but I don't know, Councillor McKenney, if you want to make any kind of wrap up on the motion before we go to the vote.
Yeah, I don't think I need to take much time. It just really is to ensure that staff have as Chief Chapman said, that they have the tools that they need to ensure that staging is done in a way that doesn't put residential neighborhoods, vulnerable road users, pedestrians, kids going to school, families traveling to daycare, at risk. So it is just an added tool, and it's a direction to come back in Q2 of 2023 with any specific rules that they feel that they would need to be able to come up with their traffic rules that they need to ensure this. So the timing is far enough off. We recognize that staff have got a full work plan right now, so it certainly gives them time to consider this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council. I see the chair is back. So I'll turn the meeting back over to him. We're just about to vote on the Leeper motion, Mr. Chair, and all questions and comments are finished on both the motion and the report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair. On the motion, is this motion carried?
Carried.
Carried. Thank you very much. And on the report as amended, is this report carried?
Carried.
Also carry on Councillor Kavanagh's motion.
Oh, pardon me. I wasn't aware that there was a third on Councillor Kavanagh. No. Okay, fair.
No, okay. I thought.
Okay, moving on to item number 9, Bylaw and Regulatory Services 2019 and 2020 Annual Report. So we do have a PowerPoint presentation from our Chief Roger Chapman. We've received no correspondence from the Clerk's Office to date on this and no delegation, so I'll turn it over now to Chief Chapman. Please go ahead.
Chair, if I may, I'll do just a little introductory comments.
Absolutely. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Roger Chapman will be taking you through the presentation today that goes over Bylaw and Regulatory Services activities and accomplishments over the last 2 years. But before he begins, I want to take this opportunity to acknowledge the dedicated staff in that service, particularly over the last 18 months during the pandemic. Chair, you mentioned this in your opening remarks. Bylaw has played an integral role in the city's COVID-19 response and has been looked to by other municipalities as an example of best practices for COVID enforcement. And I saw Roger and his team while they were scrambling to adjust to new regulations on a regular basis over this provincial regulations and new responsibilities. Other municipalities often look to him and his team for leadership with regards to how to approach some of these new challenges they had. This team has taken so much on, and you'll hear in the presentation, continues to provide many valuable services to our residents, despite the unpredictable circumstances, and on top of being on the front line of enforcing the regulations that kept our community safe with our public health team and their recommendations. So enforcement is an important part of that as well. So I hope you join me in acknowledging their commitment, and now I'll turn it over to Roger. Thank you for allowing me to do that introduction.
Thank you very much, Tony. So we'll go to slide 1. Thank you. Next slide. Thank you. So good morning, Chair and committee members, and thank you for this opportunity today to present our 2019 and 2020 annual report. In 2019, Bylaw and Regulatory Services enhanced existing and established new community education and outreach programs. BLRS has played an integral role in bylaw reviews and associated development of amendments to update various bylaws to align with the new legislation and address enforcement practices. In 2019, BLRS led or participated in strategic policy work, including the feasibility of the on-demand accessible taxi service, report on rental accommodation study and regulatory regime, licensing and regulations on payday loan establishments, harmonization of smoke-free bylaws, development of the 2019-2022 bylaw review work plan, and vehicle for hire accessibility fund allocation plan. Additionally, BLRS scoped and implemented a new platform for service requests and conducted extensive planning and testing through a pilot project. BLRS also co-chaired alongside with the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario, the Ottawa Compliance Project, focusing on the Byward Market area. Finally, in 2019, BLRS participated in over 60 community and council-related events, such as the Help Santa Toy Parade and the Wiggle Waggle Walkathon. Aside from COVID-19 enforcement in 2020, sorry, can we go to the next slide? So aside from COVID-19 enforcement in 2020, which I'll discuss in the next slide, BLRS began importing parking control calls into the new client relations management system, Dynamics 365. In 2020, in-person events were suspended due to COVID-19. However, BLRS participated in many events held virtually, such as the Ottawa Capital Pride Week. In 2020, BLRS also participated in strategic policy work, including the Byward Market right-of-way patio update, the rental housing bylaw management bylaw report, short-term rental bylaw, residential mural bylaw, and amendments to the smoking and vaping bylaw to address responsibilities of property owners of water pipe establishments. Next slide, please. Despite highly unpredictable circumstances brought about by emerging COVID-19 pandemic in early 2020, BLRS pivoted its operations to ensure business continuity, responsiveness, and staff safety. BLRS staff demonstrated resilience, professionalism, and dedication to public service in the face of a global emergency and led the city's enforcement response to a rapidly evolving COVID-19 pandemic. In 2020, BLRS responded to 13,500 pandemic-related service requests and over 3,000 COVID inquiries. Additionally, BLRS collaborated with external stakeholders to ensure the consistent and informed approach to COVID-19 enforcement and played an integral role in the development and enforcement of the temporary mandatory mask bylaw. Proactive initiatives during 2020 included Parks Patrol, business compliance with provincial orders, OPH orders, and the temporary mask bylaw. Next slide. Although 2020 saw a 4% decrease in service requests, this is attributable to a 10,000 service request reduction in parking due to changes in enforcement during the pandemic. However, with parking control data excluded, bylaw enforcement officers responded to close to 65,000 service requests, which is a 14% increase over 2019. This also excludes COVID-19 related work. Although it's encouraging to see the data reflects BLRS meeting its response times, it's also important to note that the initial response time is based on a date or timestamp of an officer or other BLRS staff person, such as a dispatcher, clicking on the call in the queue and map, not when the officer actually arrives on the site. While this metric was appropriate based on the technology being used at the time of the service review, BLRS has made investments that will allow for a more fulsome analysis of our performance. Once the full implementation of the new map replacement program is complete, the time to close a call will also be considered in conjunction with the initial response to get a true and more fulsome picture of response times of our performance as we move into 2022. Next slide, please. Yeah, sorry, next slide. So it should be on slide 6. One more slide, please. Thank you. A review of the enforcement data since Council's investment in the service as part of the BLRS service review in 2017 indicates that service requests are increasing at a rate that is not sustainable for the service based on the current service standards and staffing levels. BLRS's ability to handle service demand has been and will continue to be impacted by the continued growth and other factors such as aging infrastructure and increases in human and animal population. If the trends observed continues, BLRS will not be able to maintain its current service levels. Over the last several years, BLRS has endeavored to mitigate the effects of growth and intensification on the service's ability to sustain its service standards through strategies, which I will go through over the next slide. Next slide, please. So mitigation efforts include the addition of a public information officer to coordinate social media inquiries, web amendments, community and school events, public inquiries, and an attempt to increase voluntary compliance through education and public outreach, reducing the need for BLRS's intervention. Implementation of the alternate response program, where letters are sent for cases of first-time offenders, reducing the need for officers to attend these types of calls and allows for prioritization of more serious offenses. Training supervisor position was also created as part of the BLRS service review recommendations to ensure the need to increase for the increase and consistent training is met and to ensure standardized messaging for call types through SOPs. Next slide, please. Thank you. The accomplishments of 2019 and 2020 help to ensure that BLRS will continue to successfully serve and the needs of our dynamic city. With the commitment and skills of our employees, BLRS remains dedicated to delivering the high quality service that the residents of Ottawa have come to expect. BLRS has shown leadership in the city and in the community during a rapidly evolving global pandemic. BLRS has endeavored to mitigate the effects of growth and intensification on its ability to sustain service standards through various strategies. Staff will continue to monitor the trends described in this report, consider further options to mitigate the increase in demand, and provide analysis on growth requirements or service level adjustments for Council's considerations as required. Thank you very much.
Understanding, how cute and wonderful that event is. I've never seen somebody say "wiggle waggle walkathon" with a straight face. So well done on that, Roger, and thank you so much for your work on this report. We do have one motion on this item, so I'll allow Councillor Fleury to introduce that motion prior to questions for staff, and then we'll move on to Councillor Deans, who has some questions. So please go ahead, Councillor Fleury.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wonder if Mark, our clerk, could put it on the screen.
Up shortly.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, so this is attached to this report. So consideration is a motion. Whereas Bylaw and Regulatory Services is responsible for the enforcement and administration of more than 50 municipal bylaws and a number of provincial acts, as well as delivery of associated programs in the City of Ottawa. And whereas Bylaw and Regulatory Services strive to provide a level of service and performance that meets and exceeds the expectation of residents and visitors to Ottawa, whereas service request volume has increased by an average of 9% per year yearly over the last 5 years, excluding COVID-related service requests, and whereas the increase in demand for bylaw services is impacted by population, human and animal growth, intensification, aging infrastructure, and other factors, and is unsustainable at the current rate of increase. And whereas service requests are assigned a priority level base on the call type and service standards have been established in order to meet service delivery demands. And whereas understanding that municipalities have different metrics, the average service request per officer per year in other comparable Ontario municipalities surveyed range from 400 to 600, while in Ottawa it is 866 service requests per officer per year. And whereas this pressure results in a need to increase staffing resources in bylaw and regulatory services in order to achieve a more reasonable volume of service requests per officer to better enable sustainable service delivery to residents and visitors. Therefore, be resolved that committee and council direct staff to review as part of the 2022 operating budget estimates funding of additional staffing in bylaw and regulatory services to work towards reducing the service request per officer to be more in line with that of other comparable municipalities.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fleury. Really appreciate this motion. Moving on to questions to staff. On the report, we've got Councillor Deans. Please go ahead for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Roger, and to your whole team at Bylaw and Regulatory Services. Bylaws really aren't worth the paper they're written on unless they're enforced. And all of us, I think every single member of council really spends a lot of time working with Bylaw and Regulatory Services and hoping that we get some quick action and quick return response time. And your whole team has been very effective in helping us navigate some choppy waters in our ward from a Bylaw and Regulatory perspective. So thank you for all that you do. I have a specific question, then a comment. The specific question is around the new vaccine passport and how that, I was just had an opportunity when I was in my car yesterday to listen to a little bit of news talk radio, and they had a number of business owners on that they were talking to about their concerns around enforcement and their expectations that this might get a little choppy in the weeks ahead. And I wonder what preparation has been made to address calls for service regarding the vaccine passport.
Mr. Chair, thank you, Councillor, for the question. I can say that we just received the regulations earlier this week, so the team is still in the review process and informing our own staff about what the regulations are and what the requirements are. I can also tell you that we have a meeting set up for Friday morning, for tomorrow morning, with the BIAs to try and inform them and engage in a question and answer period as well, so that we can try and address some of their concerns before the regulations come into effect. Quite honestly, we're surprised that the regulations are such that they are. It's very basic. I think it's when you're talking about restaurants, it's indoors only. Inside some of the sports facilities and such, the passport's required. But we're not anticipating a huge increase in call volume related to this. I think that in particular, the restaurant industry has been very good at following the regulations. So we always have some establishments that we have to deal with, but by and large, they're very compliant. So we're not anticipating a lot of or a huge increase in service requests.
I think the issue for the business owners is not their compliance, it's their concern about compliance of restaurant patrons that may object to a vaccine passport and not want to leave the establishment because they haven't been vaccinated. And the discussions seem to center around who's going to enforce that if there are unwieldy clients in those establishments that are refusing to leave.
Mr. Chair, thank you, Councillor. I would suggest that that would be a call directly to 311 or to the police's non-emergency call phone line. I think if you've got somebody who's refusing to produce proof of their vaccine and the restaurant management is having some difficulty with that person, they should be contacting the police immediately so that somebody can attend and help facilitate that interaction.
Okay, thank you for that. I appreciated your discussion in your presentation about the mitigation measures that Bylaw services have put into place. And I think that's obviously a great strategy, but I also welcome Councillor Fleury's motion because I'm very aware of the workload that Bylaw and regulatory services have and the needs that the demands on your time. We all depend on you very much. So am I correct in understanding that the call volume over the past 5 years has increased by 9% annually? So 45% call volume increase over 5 years?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, again, thank you, Councillor. To be precise, we've experienced a 32.8% increase over the last 5 years. So on average, 9% per year increase.
Okay, and in terms of increase in staffing positions, have you had any?
Mr. Chair, we had an increase in staffing as a result of the service review that was conducted using data from 2012 to 2016. So those resources were put in place in early 2018. So we have not had an increase since then.
So have you done an analysis of, I think the way Councillor Fleury has put it in his motion is a sort of a workload per employee, per officer. Have you done an analysis of the demand on those officers and how many additional officers you would need to meet prior levels of service?
Mr. Chair, thank you, Councillor. It's difficult to say what is acceptable service request level per officer. What I can say is that currently around the 900 service requests per officer is not sustainable. That's obvious to us, but I'm not sure at this point, and we're still, continuing to do some more analysis on that. What is it 700? Is it 800? I can't answer that question. I don't know what is reasonable for officers to handle. And looking at comparators across the province, as the councillor has indicated in his motion, our research has showed that it's 400 to 600 per officer. I can tell you that we take a lot of pride in the service that we provide, and it's we've done different things, including the alternate response program that we have in place that takes away the need for officers to be knocking on doors on a first-time offense. So we feel that we're a much more efficient service, and that we can handle more service requests. But I think at this point, and watching the trends of how service requests have increased over the last 5 years, it's getting to be more and more of a challenge for officers to be effective when they're doing these investigations and investing the time that's required to do a proper investigation.
And I mean no disrespect, because I believe that Bylaw and Regulatory Services is doing an outstanding job, but I have noticed a slippage a little bit in your ability to provide the level of service that we've seen in the past, just because of the sheer call volume. So, I mean, my concern is that we not miss this budget cycle. I think you need more resources. I think you need to ask for more resources. I think you need to know what that ask should be. And I would hope between now and when the budget is tabled, we can figure that out so that council has the opportunity to give you the support that you need to continue to provide great bylaw and regulatory services in the City of Ottawa. Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I couldn't agree more with you, Councillor. I appreciate that intervention. Next, we have Councillor Dudas, please, for 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chair. And Councillor Dean's actually segued into where I was going to go. I did have a question to Mr. Chapman in regards to the motion that's on the floor. And just your budgetary process. Were you anticipating that you were going to come back through the budget cycle with a request for additional staff, with the analysis in place, with an assessment of the service workloads? Was that something that you were going to be? I mean, I'm not asking for numbers right now, but I guess I'm assuming that that was something that was going to come forward regardless.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councillor, for the question. It's I don't have to tell anybody. I mean, this has been a difficult 18 months for us, and we've invested a lot of time into the pandemic response and doing the enforcement of the COVID regulations. So, quite honestly, I mean, we've spent some time looking at how these trends are impacting our service, and trying to identify other mitigations has really been our focus, not necessarily on increasing FTEs. We're always looking at other ways to be more efficient. So, have we spent the time to do the analysis of what's required, how many FTEs? I can't answer that question today. I can say that that work will start, and we will provide something between now and the budget process, given the motion.
Okay, because I can say that your staff and you have been absolutely phenomenal. You were phenomenal before the pandemic. You've been absolutely amazing with the resources and the workload that you've had to endure, and the constant in changing regulations and adapting to them. My only thought, though, is as we head into the budget cycle, there's many competing interests. And while I do completely agree that I think that adding more resources to your team is likely where we're going to end up, I like to have all the information in front of us as to how we're going to pay for it, where's that going to come from, what they'll be assigned to do, and how that will improve the situation for your team, but also for the service levels. So I'm leaning towards supporting this motion because I do like the notion of it, but I guess I'm wondering, my question then is, were you going to do the work that was being directed in this motion regardless? Will this change the outcome of what you were going to propose as part of your budget report, request, proposition?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I mean, it's part of the process. I mean, there are asks. There's discussion that has to still take place. I mean, there's only a finite number of or amount of money. We wouldn't bring forward a request for FTEs without identifying a source, a funding source for those FTEs. So that would be part of the consideration that we would, we'll work with finance. If we're bringing forward an ask for FTEs, we'll include a funding source for that.
I'm absolutely pleased to hear that. And I knew you would say that. So thank you, because once again, I always want to make sure that we're making the right decisions. And I know that your team definitely needs the support, and it may end up being more bodies, but I very much appreciate the work that you've done with the bodies that you've had. And once again, they've been absolutely phenomenal throughout all this. So hats off to you, and hats off to your team. Thank you very much, Jeff.
Thank you.
I've never seen a team be more effective at self-funding FTEs. So I think that, Roger, you'll come up with a good plan here. Councillor Fleury, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, colleagues, and thank you, Roger. I want, for those who might not know, I'm one of the communities that relies most heavily on bylaw. When you look at the call volume, it's not driven by me, it is driven by residents, it's driven by business complaints. So I do want to recognize that and acknowledge that for committee's interest. And I do want to thank Roger, beginning by just the COVID response. I know, Vera and OPH has done tremendous work. The day-to-day operators and supporting of those inconsistent directives by the province has been Roger and his team. So really tip my hat off to all the COVID response. Now turning my head to our responsibility, council and committee has passed bylaws, and we pass those bylaws for reasons. We want to make sure they're applicable. We want to make sure we protect livability and the various standards that are established. So Roger, my question is more for public interest. So I used your data in your report relating to the volume of call per officers. Can you give us a sense of what is a reasonable service level to service requests per officer, in your humble opinion, for your team?
Mr. Chair, Councillor, thank you for the question. Again, that's difficult. We haven't done that analysis to see what, because quite frankly, we haven't been to, in a position where we've had, the capability of having an officer handle 700 complaints. That's, we've always been, one of the most efficient services in this province, and, with the FTEs that we have currently. And, as I said earlier, what I can say is that the nearly 900 service requests that an officer is handling right now is not sustainable. Where that, is it 750? Is it 800? I'm not sure. I'd certainly like to see it in a more manageable level for our officers, and then do some more analysis on what. So if we can get down to 850, 800. And see how things go from there. So we'd have to do more of an analysis based on whatever that new benchmark is.
It'd be nice, I think we all recognize the increased pressure. Councillor Dean's raised the 45% increase over the last 5 years. So that's almost double the volume in 5 years. That shows you the complexity of our bylaws, the range of complaints, and the growing city pressures we have. So I would like us to not only look at an increase in FTEs, but also have a fair, I know you were talking about a new management system, a new tech tool that would help support the team. But as that comes to be, I think we do have to be a bit more transparent around what is fair to our officer, what is fair to our service levels as we come back. So to me, the exercise for this year's budget is one of increase of service, but it's not something that we can abandon. I think we need to, as a committee, to stay hyper-focused on our ability to deliver quality service and be fair to our officers too, who take pride in their work. So Roger, is that something that you can take on as part of your review to establish what is a fair baseline for service requests for our officers?
Mr. Chair, yes, absolutely. That's our intent. And again, also taking into consideration some of the other mitigation strategies that we have and some of the other projects that we have. I mean, technology is not always the solution, but certainly enhances our ability to handle more service requests. And that's, I go back to the alternate response program, our dispatch modernization project that we have underway. as well as the map replacement will certainly help with our performance management as well, and our abilities to monitor performance.
Okay. Thank you, Roger. If you could convey our thanks to officers on the ground who've not only pivoted to respond to all the COVID stuff, but continue to do our diligence. I know for some in the media, they love to focus on the parking and parking tickets. I'm focused on everything else bylaw does, because it's really meaningful to keep our communities with a high quality of life. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fleury. Do we have any further questions to staff on this or the motion? Councillor Fleury, do you want to wrap up on the motion? No, you're good. Any further questions to staff? Okay, on the Fleury motion, does anyone want to call yeas and nays, or can we say carried?
Carried.
Carried. Good. All right, wonderful. Okay, and on this report, is it received and carried as it's going to council? So received and carried?
Received and carried.
Received and carried.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the excellent questions as well. Thank you, Roger, and to your team as well. Item number 10, Crime Prevention Ottawa Annual Action Report 2020. We have a PowerPoint presentation from Nancy Worsfold, and Councillor Deans will present if required as well. Over to you two. Please go ahead.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and good morning again, colleagues. Nancy and I are here to present the Crime Prevention Ottawa Annual Report for 2020. 2020 was a challenging year with the onset of the pandemic and social upheavals and demands for social justice following the murder of George Floyd in the United States and other events that have led to the defund police movement. As chair of the Crime Prevention Ottawa Board, I'm proud of how our small but nimble team has contributed to community safety through the pandemic with projects such as Unsafe at Home Ottawa, which is a text and chat helpline for those caught at home in abusive relationships. Our funding and partnership building was key in launching this program that has since expanded with the securing of provincial funding. Shine Youth Arts microgrants to promote a safe and meaningful youth engagement. This is a program for youth that provides grants for unique and artful projects. CPO has also pivoted quickly to the online environment and hosted more events than usual, actually doubling our participation over 2019 levels. Perhaps the most important work that CPO embarked upon this year has been our renewed strategic plan. We have undertaken a process of adaptation and renewal in response to our changing landscape. We are seeking to address evolving issues and stakeholder relationships as we move forward through and past the pandemic. A central part of our new approach will be engaging the board in new explorations regarding equity, diversity, and inclusion, as well as harnessing the strength of the board for key projects and advocacy. I'll now hand it over to our Executive Director, Nancy Worsfold, to take us briefly through the details of the strategic plan. Nancy.
Thank you, Councillor Deans and Chair Lula. Mark, I would ask that you put our slides up. So I believe we're on slide 3. Thank you. During the strategic planning discussions, it became clear that our board's vision for our work is broad and that our 2006 mission statement, which focused on crime reduction, did not reflect a great deal of our current work, which has a broader vision of community safety. So the board adopted a new mission to contribute to crime prevention and enhanced community safety and well-being in Ottawa through evidence-informed initiatives. Next slide. For many years, CPO's priorities have been listed as youth, neighborhoods, and gender-based violence. Our work on home takeovers, for example, or the CODA Committee, Connecting on Disability and Abuse, never fit those pillars, so we have articulated a fourth priority, vulnerable adults. In addition, we have refined our vision to squarely focus on marginalized children and youth. And of course, our current circumstances demand a focus on the massive social, community, and life changes thrust upon us by COVID. Next slide, please. While we have identified the 4 concrete priorities, youth, neighborhoods, gender-based violence, and vulnerable adults, we have also highlighted 2 cross-cutting, intersecting priorities that touch all aspects of our work. Those are applying an inclusive and anti-racist lens and a focus on mental wellness. I'd like to share with you a small example of this in action. This summer, a residential neighborhood with a significant concentration of racialized families living in social housing was rocked by 2 homicides 6 weeks apart. Both of these incidents involved a young man shooting at a group of youth in public. Each incident left 1 young person dead, another injured, and many traumatized witnesses. To respond to the mental well-being needs of the neighborhood, the local community activated the post-incident neighborhood support networks, an approach that CPO has supported and nurtured for the past 8 years. The response sought to mitigate the worst of the trauma for the neighborhood and to promote healing as a community. In addition, CPO funded the local community resource center to co-create a youth strategy with neighborhood youth to increase their health, safety, and well-being. While there are no quick fixes or easy solutions, we firmly believe that by empowering racialized and marginalized youth, by working alongside them, we will produce a strategy that is meaningful, relevant, and effective. Next slide, please. In response to the social injustices that have been highlighted in the past year, our board has embarked on deep conversations about how to build and rebuild relationships and healing. We have the right people to achieve these goals as we have wide and diverse representation of leadership from across our city in areas of health, housing, police, youth and social services, and the community. One concrete step approved by our board at our meeting earlier this week is to undertake a diversity audit of our own organization in order to identify our strengths and our gaps. Next slide, please. CPO is proud of our work and our focus on ongoing evaluation. We analyze the evaluations of our events, our grants, and seek to continually renew our work. We pride ourselves on being nimble while respecting the need for ongoing dialogue to bring our board and our partners along together. Our projects seek to build awareness, enhance partnerships, and develop skills. In short, we seek to build the capacity of our partners, our neighborhoods, and ultimately our whole community to address community safety and to address these issues collaboratively together across all our many differences. Next slide. Thank you. Thank you very much. And we welcome any questions.
Thank you very much, Chair Deans, and your whole team for the great work over the course of this last year. We appreciate this report. And we have a question from Councillor Kavanagh. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Councillor Deans, on all your work. This is exactly what we need, is more preventative measures. I really, really appreciate the extra effort you've made in terms of during the pandemic related to domestic violence, which is an incredibly serious issue. And I appreciate coming up with the texting method. This is great. And I think that it's very, very helpful. We still don't know what's going to be left behind when the pandemic does finally leave us. But there's a lot of damage out there, people being isolated, and a lot of your work has been related to that. So I appreciate it. And your work with the youth in terms of the murals and stuff, we were able to take advantage of one of those, and it is very helpful. It's very positive for the community. I'm hoping that we're going to continue in that direction. You talked about things like shootings in the community, something we've experienced. Many of us certainly have in Bay Ward. And I appreciate those extra efforts that are being made for youth. As you know, I've been trying to work on a youth task force. It's very difficult to get all those chickens in one room of who deals with youth, but we'll continue on that. I just wanted your comment on what more we can do for youth, because I think that's probably the biggest challenge, particularly after the pandemic. It really made it difficult to reach out to those that were in need.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh, for that. And because you mentioned the micro grants program, the art program for youth, I can tell you the board has just renewed it for a second year. So it was really a great program. We had great uptake, very innovative and artful, and we're happy to be renewing it for a second time.
Excellent. And I was just made aware of the House of Paints and the Take It to the Streets dance competitions as well. That is fantastic. I know it's not been CPO, but I would ask you to consider looking at that as well in terms of arts. It was recently done, and I thank Councillor Leeper, who's not here at the moment, but for being part of it. But it brought youth out and was very positive. Low cost in terms of bang for your buck, but it was a dance competition, and they did it right outside of Britannia Woods, as it turned out, in Britannia Park. But that kind of efforts kind of fits in that same idea with the murals. It reaches out and grabs people's interests and inspires, very much inspires. So I'd love to see more of that. So just a thought, because House of Paint was involved with that, and the NAC. So I would urge you to look at that as well. But those programs are worth their weight in gold. We have to continue to do these methods to reach out to those who wouldn't have an opportunity otherwise. So, but thank you for your ongoing great work.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Vice Chair Eglai, please go ahead.
Yeah, this is more a comment than a question, building on what Councillor Kavanagh just said. I see Dan Chenier is on the line. This will ring a bell for him as well, I think. But my very first job with the City of Ottawa wasn't actually as a city councillor, but it was with a pilot project that I believe was under Dan Chenier's umbrella, because Dan has been here forever, as everyone knows, called the Mobile Youth Unit. And just to show you how old it was for some of us in the room, informally, we were referred to as the Mod Squad. And we were a number of university students that were deployed in the Rideau Centre market area to do the type of thing that Councillor Kavanagh was talking about. We organized breakdance competitions with the youth there. We partnered with Shea 106 radio station for a lip sync competition. And the winners got to film a video, which was shown on, again, showing my age, on CHRO, their Saturday video countdown show that they had. All which to say, these things can be done. They can be done on, with I think a minimum amount of dollars, if you've got the community behind you to do it. And they're not new ideas, but I think they're tried and true ideas. And part of what we need to continue to do is find diversions for youth, find things for youth to do that are constructive and give opportunity and feed into things that they're interested in and that they take pride in. So I know that's a lot of the work that you do, Nancy and Councillor Deans. I know certainly I've had a number of the mural projects, for example, in my ward. I think of Tanglewood and Parkwood Hills. both have been hugely successful with the young people there. Great engagement with them. They take pride every time they go by and they see what they've done. The one in Tanglewood, we coupled up with a community garden project, so it's almost like a tangled garden kind of look that's there. So yeah, I want to thank you for the work you do. I know you're small but mighty, and just words of encouragement to keep on going the way you're going, because you're doing good work. It's appreciated.
Thank you.
I think that a young Councillor Cherney may have actually won one of those breakdancing competitions when he was Grandmaster T. Thank you very much. Do we have any further questions to staff on that? Okay, seeing none. So we are being asked now to receive this report for information and to approve the following updated mission statement for Crime Prevention Ottawa as described in the report, to contribute to crime prevention and enhance community safety and well-being in Ottawa through collaborative, evidence-informed initiatives. Is this report carried and is this report received and this motion carried? Received and carried?
Received, carried.
Thank you very much, everyone. Okay, we are moving on to Community and Social Services Department, grants and contributions reaffirmation, essential health and social supports and supports in social housing programs. We have Donna Gray with us. Donna, do you want to make a brief presentation, or should we proceed to questions regarding this affirmation?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is, regular housekeeping for us. It's just affirmation that these programs, as parts of our grants and contribution policy, that Council continues to endorse and support the delivery of these programs. So it is very much just a housekeeping report.
Do we have any questions to staff on this report? Seeing none, is this report carried?
Carried.
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 Okay. We have no in-camera items, but I do recall that Councillor Fleury wanted to speak on an item on one of the inquiries. So we'll just get to that very quickly. So we've received a memo that's listed in the agenda. Oops, sorry, I left my timer running here. We have information previously distributed, which is the use of delegated authority during 2020 by the Community and Social Services Department. We have no notices of motion. So, Mr. Councillor Fleury, if you want to ask your questions on your inquiry, please go ahead, which has been lifted.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe I could give Donna and I don't know if Lila has joined us, but the responses to the inquiry has evolved. I guess there's been changes since the official reporting in writing. So I don't know if it'd be for the record, I know we have residents and both BIAs who are quite interested in the city's response to the situation. So I don't know if it's appropriate to ask if Donna or Lila would have an update from what's been submitted in writing. And if not, I do have a few questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd be happy to provide the first kind of overview, and then if there's additional more detailed questions, the Associate General Manager, Lala, who's been tasked with leading some of the coordination of the services in the market, can respond. But the inquiry and the response today in front of you was really around how do we mobilize the gaps that the ward councillor has identified in the byward market, and what additional resources and supports we could bring to bear within the city services. And a big piece of that, as we can see in the work that the report says, is really enhancing, using some temporary funds to enhance our outreach services in the market, improve our coordination of the services in the market, because there are multiple agencies that are providing social services and outreach services in the market. And also to look at what we're seeing as the impact of COVID, really enhancing spaces where people can get that sense of connection and support to be able to address some of the challenges that they've been facing, who are individuals who are living and experiencing homelessness, get support in areas where some of the services have been impacted by COVID. And so in that, we're continuing to maintain our respite centers that have been opened as a result of COVID. And we have supported a really innovative and unique approach to providing supports in the market around homelessness to ensure that the mental health supports and housing and social assistance wraparound supports are provided. And that's the open air drop-in center that we have created in the market with Shepherds of Good Hope. And that really is the starting of the first phase of what we're hoping as that facility gets built, the day program that has been supported with our homelessness and rapid housing money, that wraparound model will move from what we're seeing as an open area into a permanent center of support in the market. And you can see that we've also addressed the cleanliness in working with our counterparts in public works, and also portable toilets, which we think are critical to maintain while we're still in this phase of post-COVID. We've also convened with Ottawa Public Health and have been working on the mental health, which has really been seen as a primary gap in supports in our community, as mental health resources and supports, primarily in the market for individuals who have been experiencing homelessness. And Ottawa Public Health, in their report to the board, recent report to the board, has a number of recommendations really enhancing some of the issues that in the market around safe supply, targeted mental health strategies, and outreach and integration. We really are supportive of the work that the board is doing in terms of advancing and convening around mental health. One of the requests that we had was from Ottawa Tourism and the Ottawa Gatineau Hotel Association. They met with myself and our Associate General Manager, Lila Gibbons, and really talked to us about the businesses in the community and how they could come together to also support what they see as a broader issue, broader issues of social issues in the community. And when we met with them, we detailed all of the work that we were doing. The council has directed us, the investments council has made, the movement we're making in the housing and homelessness plan outreach, and really what they felt was there was also a need to enhance the communication with the Byward market leaders to help them understand that council has made a significant investment and is, concerned and interested in the Byward market. And when we had that meeting, they asked that we convene a meeting with all of the leaders of the Byward market to really listen to the investments that we've done with all our city services, including our economic development partners and planning and infrastructure, and really to see the vast array of supports and services and directions and plans that we have for the market. And out of that meeting, they pulled together all of the leaders in the market. And when we portrayed that, we really understood too that there was a need to enhance our communication and our communication strategies in terms of the work that we're doing specific out of these, pulling all the activities that we're doing in the multiple plans that council has approved to really demonstrate those investments and then to identify some of the gaps. And we committed to come back and through that conversation, really where we saw the primary gap was around mental health. And how could we take that and work with the community mental health players and individuals in the community and mental health in the downward or the Byward market, and really look to how we could bring clinical and other supports into the Byward market. And we've really taken that away as an action item to work both with Ottawa Public Health, Ottawa Inner City Health, Canadian Mental Health Association, and other partners to really say, how do we fill that gap? And we have, as we're moving forward, a mental health guiding council. And I think, the efforts of this work fit nicely under that council as we really start to look at the investments moving forward. So I think in summary, what I can say is that where we've advanced is, I think, is having a clear understanding with the ward councillor, Councillor Fleury, and understanding some of the issues. And then how are we mobilizing collectively and coordinating our city response, but also those that other community agencies and health supports that we feel need to be coordinated to come in and really do an effective response in the market.
Councillor Fleury?
I do. I appreciate, Donna, your intervention and update. I do want to thank you and Lila specifically on the engagement. I think just having a face to the organization, engaging with residents, engaging with businesses, and engaging with the tourism sector has been very important. As you know, and you were there, we've had a recent meeting called by the mayor with the city manager and the chief of police. And there's also the Carleton University study that's going on through the neighborhood resource team. There's a leadership table we're creating. So there's a number of table. I would hope that we can streamline some of those conversations to make sure that they're happening in coordination. For the record purposes, Mr. Chair, I'll just highlight what I would like to see based on what I've heard from businesses and residents. So it is no surprise to anyone, because of the concentration of services, because of the opioid crisis, because of the housing crisis we're faced with, that there are severe mental health and addictions and housing challenges in our area. The business community and residents are just tired of calling because they'd be on the phone all day reporting these. And there's been demonstration of system gaps, which Donna is and her team's responding partly. What the community is clearly asking is for coordinated city-led on-the-ground outreach services, as we've done with the respite, but in a more mobile on-the-ground efforts in the area. And the area for us is more broadly, it's not just Byward, it includes Rideau Street and the broader segment, because we don't want to push problems in or out of another area. So I know, and I want to thank social services, public health, and others to working together. I know we want to get there, so appreciate, one step before we could start running. So, but we need to get there. The other one is we really need increase in safe supply, and we've heard that very directly, that the opioid crisis is real, and the addictions challenges we face. There are harm reduction approaches that have shown to work, and right now we're seeing the provincial and federal government throwing the ball at each other, but we really need to see investments. And then obviously, as we've approved at this committee, housing initiative, we gotta be hyper focused on the delivery of those efforts, specifically for housing. Housing first, housing and supports for the population that is in our shelter. So, Mr. Chair, I won't take more time, but I thought it was important for the record, because I have had Donna's been CC'd, and so has Lila, and responded. We've at least responded to 100 residents and 500, businesses and residents relating to these matters. So I'm happy to hear that the city and seeing that the city is engaged on the matter. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Fleury. I appreciate that. Do we have any other business? Seeing none? It's seriously wonderful to see all of your beautiful faces again, and to see other human beings and not have my shoulder thrown up on has just been a wonderful experience this afternoon and morning. So thank you very, very much. It is great to see you, and it's great to be back to work for our great city. On adjournment, is this motion carried?
Carried.
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 We are adjourned. Thank you so much, everyone. Our next meeting of Community and Protective Services Committee is scheduled for Thursday, October 21st, 2021. We'll see you then, and we'll definitely see you there. GM DeMonte. Take care.